What are some true-life horror stories? Story. Back in the day, my grandpa used to go to the nearby town from his village for various purposes, leaving early morning and returning by night. The town was about 15 kilometers from the village, and then the rural areas were not much electrified. Through the outskirts and the fields, it got difficult to see the path and reach village after it got dark. Being a relatively rich man, he had helped many fellow villagers. One such person was Shankar, a farmer who owed a huge debt to my grandpa. Grandpa had lent him a large sum of money for the marriage of his only daughter, and at a time of dire need. As such, he respected and revered my grandpa with a lot of gratitude. One day, Grandpa got very late while coming back. He couldn't see the road and lost his way. It being the rainy season, he was finding it difficult to reach the village through the puddles. After toying with the dark for a while, Grandpa was getting very worried when a familiar voice called him from behind. It was Shankar with a lamp in his hand. Shankar immediately told Grandpa to start walking, as he used the lamp from behind to show the path. He strictly told Grandpa not to look back. Not giving it much thought, Grandpa started walking. Throughout the path, he conversed with Shankar, asking how his daughter was doing and how his crops were coming around. They discussed the roads and the rains and the village, and not once did my grandpa look back. Soon they arrived at the brink of the houses. Shankar left, saying he couldn't go any further inside, as he had someplace else to go. Grandpa went on by himself and kept walking until he observed an assembly of people standing, discussing something. When they told him what they were discussing about, Grandpa froze. Shankar had passed away that day. It wasn't someone who had shown him the path. It was something. Shankar had returned from death to acknowledge his debt and provide help to Grandpa when he needed it. Story 2 was 12. When my godfather offered me money to clean his basement, I should have said no. I've never shared this before publicly, but I need to, because even as an adult, I still carry fear, not of all white people, but especially ones who act like a man I knew as a child. My godfather, Lee. I was born in Georgia. My mother was 16, my father 36. Legal, but not right. She left him when I was 1 because he was abusive. He never hit me, but he was emotionally cold and dishonest. He never told me he loved me. But he did love telling stories. One story he repeated often was how he met my godfather, Lee, at a gas station in the early 1980s. Lee, a white man, called him a racial slur. Later that night, my dad saved him from being robbed at gunpoint. From that moment on, Lee said my dad was different and became his friend. Eventually, business partner. My dad even asked Lee to be my godfather. When I was 12, I finally got to visit my dad for the summer. One night, Lee offered me cash to clean his basement. I said yes. But the moment I walked down there, I knew something was wrong. My skin prickled. The air felt thick. At the bottom of the stairs was a mannequin in full KKK robes. The walls were covered in Confederate flags, nooses, lynching memorabilia, and white power signs. I froze. Lee appeared out of nowhere and said, smiling, "That room's off limits. Don't tell your daddy. He knows, but it don't need to be remembered." I left immediately. Told my dad I was sick and wanted to go home early. He didn't ask questions, just drove me back. Years later, I brought it up. My dad just said, "Sometimes a man's got ghosts. As long as they don't haunt you, you let 'em be. But they do haunt me. I still get nervous around certain white men, the ones who smile too fast, who say things like, 'You're not like the others,' who carry themselves the way Lee did, fake calm, polite, but full of something darker. And I'll be honest, this experience damaged my trust in men overall, including black men, because my own father handed me to a man he knew kept hate in his basement. then told me to be quiet about it. I don't hate all white people, and I don't hate all men, but fear, it learned its shape early, and it hasn't left me. It has affected my everyday life and how I view white people in general. How do I reverse this? I'm 36 and terrified of white people. I can't get those images out my head. Story 3. When I was 6, I saw a black figure almost every night. When I was around 6 years old, I used to see something strange in my room. Every time I woke up, there was this black figure standing in the middle of the room. It didn't have any human features. What really creeped me out was how it looked the first time. It was kind of checkered and holding something that looked like a suitcase. After that, it started looking different. No more checkers, but still not human. It had no fingers, no toes, no palms, no face. Just a completely black, unmoving figure. As a kid, I wasn't really that scared. I kind of got used to it. I would just look at it and wait to see what would happen. Eventually, it would disappear, like it broke apart into little dots and faded away. One day, it just stopped showing up. I've never seen it again since. Story 4. The Man. I'm a male, 26, and this happened around 3 years ago when the US was practically recovered from COVID. I used to live in Long Island, New York, which is where this story takes place. For just a quick backstory for those who didn't grow up in NY, there is a huge railroad that connects lots of towns together, and the farthest it goes up to NYC. I took a business opportunity where I needed to go up to the city every day for work as an engineer, and I would get on the train to go to the city as early as 6 a.m., and getting home sometimes it would be as late as 11 p.m. Before taking this opportunity, I was never on the railroad during times like this, and I quickly came to learn that it was practically the same people on the train each time, all people going to the city and back for work, and I normally saw no new faces on my rides going there and back. One day, though, that changed. I was on a late train, probably around 10 or 11 p.m. at night during the winter time, so it was as dark as the night got around those times. I ran to catch the railroad on time to get me home, so as you can normally expect no matter the time, I couldn't find a seat on the train. I chose to stand next to the doors and was accompanied by 2 men who looked around my age, just chopping up good conversation, and a man. He looked about to be in his late 50s. He was wearing a sort of Hawaiian shirt, which was unbuttoned around 2 buttons, and his chest hair stuck out. He wore khakis, a belt, and attached to his shirt pocket he had what seemed to be a business key card on a retractable wire, which the clear sleeve it was in was yellowing. He was white, balding, but the hair I could see was gray, and he was more heavy-set. But what I really remember are his eyes. Normally, these kinds of details wouldn't be so prominent in my mind, but his mannerisms were nothing but out of the ordinary. The way this man examined the other 2 standing next to the doors, the ones in deep conversation, it was uncanny. His eyes were deep in their sockets. They were downturned so the insides of his eyes closer to his nose were higher set than the outside corners, with a look that was so tired and sad, and his lips stayed in such a pouting expression that it nearly looked like he was taking sympathy for these men. The worst part, every time they would make a joke, they would chuckle, but he would laugh, loud, louder than anyone would if they were even supposed to be included in the conversation. Just to keep my own privacy, I won't disclose which town exactly on Long Island I lived in, but I will say it is one of the last stops of the train. The man definitely made me unsettled, but I didn't think to change my spot on the train. It was packed and I was on the very first cart, so that when I got to my destination, I could leave as soon as possible. I figured that I would wait to see if this man got off on one of the stops before me, and I wish I didn't. He didn't seem like a threat to me because he was so hyper-focused on these 2 guys. But once we got to their stop, he took a few steps, basically following them out the cart, until he saw me. I was staring, I'm not proud of it, but I had 2 headphones in listening to music, and I felt like this man had to be studied, and I accidentally just drew all the attention to myself. Something in his eyes switched for just a second, but it was horrifying. His eyes looked joyful, full of some type of childlike joy on Christmas or their birthday. And right then it was as if his feet just stopped, like they were dried in concrete, and he just stayed on the train. That is when I wanted to scream. We were a few stops away from my stop, and I had no doubt in my mind that if this guy seeing me made him stop from getting off at one stop, there is only one other stop he will get off at. Mine. Now, I know this sounds like the dumbest thing ever, but I walked home from getting off the train. I'm a big guy, not super tall, but tall enough that most guys don't tower over me, and I'm not weak, so I never had anything to really worry about. Yeah, I wasn't scared of this guy himself and what he could do, but it's more of his intentions. I'm a guy who wouldn't fight someone for fun, and it's something that would be my last resort, and the last thing I wanted to do was throw hands with this man with such a sorrowful look in his eyes. Then it was my stop. I got off, and with no surprise, he did too. I started walking at a pace that didn't scream, "I'm scared," or "I need to get away," but it was at a pace that looked normal for me. But peering behind my shoulder, I saw him matching my pace, and it looked so unnatural, uncomfortable, like it hurt for him to walk at that pace. He continued to follow my pace, and no stores nearby were open for me to go to. So, as I approached my house, I remember the hill that you had to climb to reach the street. And looking at the man still matching my pace to the very best of his abilities, he looked exhausted, so I just had to pray that he wouldn't be able to climb the hill as fast as me. I approached the bottom of the hill and sprinted as fast as I could and didn't stop until I reached my house and jumped over my backyard fence instead of going up to my front porch to open the front door on the chance he followed me fast enough to see me enter my house. My back door is a sliding door, however, and I couldn't unlock it unless I was in the house, so the only thing I could do was sit and wait in a bush, and I wasn't too scared of him seeing me in the pitch dark, but I was scared of him hearing me if I moved too much. I peered through my fence as I saw him climb up the hill, walking at a more comfortable-looking pace for him. He started looking around, looking for a sign of me. Nothing. He approached closer, just looking around my street, and under a streetlight I saw him. More like I saw his eyes, full of rage, no longer the joyful or sorrowful eyes I had once seen. I watched him pace back and forth on the road for a long time, until eventually he turned around and went down the hill once again. I waited for a long time before going into my house and going to bed. The next day I took off of work. I went to the police and made a report. And for the rest of the day I decided that I wouldn't go straight from my stop on the railroad to the city anymore, and found a string of having to hop off one train to another around 3 times before going to the city, in hopes that the man would take the direct route. I never saw the man after that. This is the first time I had fully retold the story since it had happened, and I apologize for how long it is. But every time I even think about this story for too long, it reminds me of the people that are out there and how you have no idea what intentions they have behind their eyes. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you for listening to my story. Story 6, Friday. IF28, work as a bartender in a bar restaurant. Tonight at work, I have a very strange old man come in for a drink. As soon as he sat down, I had a bad feeling about him. He ordered a beer and started talking about his day and whatnot. He said he's from the area but moved to the state capital back in the 70s or 80s, and that he visits for 1 week every July. The conversation was normal for about 10 minutes. He'd continued by telling me about his family and what it was like growing up here. After the conversation had finished, he pulled out envelopes with stacks of photos in them. My gut was telling me the photos were something bad, but I'd hoped it was just photos from his trips. The The first one was an AI-generated photo of a cat on a surfboard, but after that, all the other ones were of young women. The photos were all AI-generated, and all the women in the photos he was showing me were celebrities wearing a typical Daisy Duke outfit. I tried to be friendly and told him how crazy it is that the internet can make these photos of celebrities look so real. At one point, he did show me a picture of a real lady that he watches on YouTube, but it was similar to the other photos. She was wearing tiny shorts bent over the engine of her truck. At this point, the cooks were leaving for the night, and I was the only employee left in the building. The owner was in the office working on paperwork. I went back to let my boss know that I was getting a really weird vibe from the guy. He agreed, saying the cooks were talking about him and a coworker had talked to the old man the previous night, outside of work. He thanked me for letting him know, asked me to get him if anything else happens, and I went back to work. He shuffled through his photos again, looking for some to show me, but let me know he couldn't show me any, because the women were only wearing their panties or nothing at all. I tried to avoid the guy after that, but there were only a few other patrons in the building, and they were all sitting at tables. I went to do some cleaning behind the bar, and he started talking about the girl from YouTube and how young and pretty she is. He pointed out that she looks like a teenager, and that's why he liked her videos so much, but told me she in her 30s. As a woman similar in age and looks, this made me extremely uncomfortable. I ignored the comments about her, and he started talking about his family again. I was responding with bare minimum responses, just trying to make it to close in 15 minutes. All the patrons had left at this point except him, and I let him know we would be closing very soon, and he should start gathering his things. Instead of picking up his photos, he said something about why he moved to the state capital. I was barely listening at this point until he said he was told to leave the city. I didn't say anything or ask about it, but he continued saying the county court had him sent away all those years ago. At this point, I'm about to just tell the owner to kick him out when he starts talking about why he was sent there. It was a story of how he did something breast-related to a girl in elementary school. I'm not very good at guessing people's ages, but this man was in elementary school in the 70s and 80s. He said the girl told the teacher on him even though it didn't happen, but no one believed him, so he got sent away. He said he was resentful towards this girl for many, many years until he heard she has special needs and isn't mentally capable of making up a lie like that. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't tell if he was saying he did it, or if he was implying the teacher was the one lying. We were closing in like 2 minutes at this point, so I tried to wrap up his conversation by telling him I hope his trip was nice, and to have a safe trip home. He slowly packed his things, and I walked around the bar to the tables by the front door to lock it after he left. He walked towards the door, slower than I've ever seen anyone walk, and he'd always walk towards me even if I was standing away from the door. I was terrified at this point, so I called my husband and put my phone in my pocket, in case something happened. At that moment, the owner turned half the lights off and walked to me. I politely told the man he has to leave now and again, said I hope he has a safe trip. As he opened the door to leave, he turned back around, made eye contact with me, which he hadn't done the whole time he was there, and said, "I'll probably be back in tomorrow to see you. I don't leave town until Sunday." Update: Saturday. I went into work tonight and immediately told my coworkers of the encounter. We were all joking around about the man, and at one point I told them, if he does come back in, I'm going to card him just to get his name so I can do a Google search on him. I wanted to know if he was just creepy or if there was a legit reason my gut wasn't sitting right about him. My coworker, who had talked to him outside of work, interjected telling us his first name. The rest of the night went by smooth, and the old man hadn't come back. Some male co-workers walked all of the women out to their cars just to make sure they left safe in case he was lingering outside. When I got home, I spent an hour or so searching for this man online. I'd look at mugshots for all the men who shared his first name. I eventually found him, and my heart dropped. I clicked on his mugshot and was met with an article about a murder that had occurred in the 90s. In the article, it stated he was the prime suspect in the murder. The only DNA evidence police had found was linked to him. He was sent to prison, and after investigations revealed his mental state, they did another round of testing on the DNA. The second round came up saying he wasn't the killer, so he got released. I then found a handful of posts from the state capitol about the old man. He's somewhat famous in the area for creeping out young women at their workplaces. The stories were all eerily similar to mine and even happened to mothers in their teen and now their teen daughters. I learned that a majority of the people strongly believe this man was guilty of the murder, and after everything I had read, I believe it too. I had an overwhelming sense that I should not have engaged with this man as much as I had, and I shouldn't have been polite. I've only been able to sleep a few hours the past few nights. I'm not necessarily scared of him, but I can't stop thinking about these teen girls who see him regularly. I had the one encounter, and it shook me to my core. I hope I never meet this man again. Story 6. I was just a kid, but the fear still follows me. I don't know why I still remember these things so clearly. I must have been around 7 or 8 years old the first time it happened. It was just a normal day. Me, my dad, and his friend had gone out with the friend's family. We were new in town, and they were the only people we knew. We were walking somewhere together, and I remember holding onto someone's shirt, thinking it was my dad. I was walking behind him, totally zoned out, but not just daydreaming. It felt like I was in a trance, like I couldn't see anything clearly. Everything was black. And then, the black faded. I snapped out of it. I woke up, and when I looked up, I realized I wasn't holding my dad's shirt. I was holding a stranger's, some random man I'd never seen before. I looked back. My dad was far behind me, walking casually with the others, completely unaware that I wasn't even with them anymore. Panic hit me like a truck. I let go and ran back to my dad. No one even noticed I had gone. I didn't say a word about what happened. When we got home, I just laid on my mother's lap. She asked what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I was terrified, and what haunts me the most to this day is that the man never turned around. He never asked who I was, never reacted to a child holding his clothes. What if I hadn't realized in time? What could he have done? Another time, maybe a year later, I was walking to a nearby shop during the day. It was bright outside, a lot of people around. The shop was about 20 minutes away, and I was used to walking there. But halfway through, I felt something off, like someone was following me. I looked back, and there she was, a woman, just staring straight into my eyes. She didn't look away. Her presence felt wrong. My gut told me I was in danger. I didn't think twice. I changed direction, walked into another street, and then ran the whole way back home. I still don't know what she wanted or if she was really after me. But I remember the look in her eyes and that feeling in my gut like I was being hunted. These stories still follow me. Sometimes they flash in my mind out of nowhere. I was just a kid, but I felt everything. The danger, the eyes watching me, the silence of a stranger, the fear of being taken. People think kids don't understand the world, but I did. I saw the parts of it no child should ever see. Story 7. When I was in my early 20s, my date and I decided to go to the Sail Inn in West Sacramento to play pool. We'd been there before and enjoyed speaking with the bartender. I can't recall her name, but she was a beautiful, engaging woman. This particular night, we walked in and noticed the pool table was occupied. There was a man and woman shooting a game, so my date bought us some drinks while I watched. After a few minutes, the man noticed me and struck up a conversation with me. When my date came over with our drinks, the man asked us if we wanted to shoot a game with them. It didn't occur to me at the time that his female companion hadn't yet said anything. We said yes, so he racked up the balls and we played against them. During the game, we introduced ourselves, and right after the man began asking me some personal questions that started to bother me. Like, where did I live? Had my date and I been dating long? Did we live together? Etc. I noticed the man and his friend kept looking at each other. I became increasingly uncomfortable, even though the rest of the conversation was benign and pleasant in nature. Weirdly, the woman still hadn't said anything. When the game was over, the man asked us if we wanted to leave with them to go to another bar down the street. At first, I didn't say anything. The guy asked us again, saying they discovered a cool bar not too far from where we were. My date and I looked at each other, and before he could say anything, I blurted out, "No thanks, we have dinner plans." We in fact did not have plans, but my date didn't argue with me. I think he saw the look of panic on my face. We both grabbed our jackets and got the hell out of there. By the time we walked out the door, the hair was literally standing up on the back of my neck. When we got back to my truck, my date asked me what was wrong. I told him I got a horrible feeling from those people and just knew we had to get away from them. I told him it was weird that he asked us to leave with them when he didn't check with his date first. He shrugged and said, "Okay." I think he thought I was crazy. A few days later, when I opened up the afternoon paper, there was an article in there about a woman from West Sacramento who'd been found murdered. I didn't think anything of it until I got to the page where the article was continued, and the picture of the woman practically leapt off the page at me. It was the beautiful bartender from the Sail Inn. Apparently, she'd been kidnapped, raped, and killed the very night I was there with my date. I was totally creeped out and thought what a crazy coincidence that was, and how sad it was that she had died so horribly. It wasn't until a month or so later that I realized why I had gotten so upset that night. A man and woman had just been arrested for the bartender's murder, along with the murders of several other people, 4 of whom were couples. There, on the front page of the Sacramento Bee, were the pictures of the killers, Gerald and Charlene Gallego, the very couple who invited my date and I to go with them to another bar. And apparently, this was one of the ruses they used to get their victims into their van. My heart did flip-flops in my chest as I read the article. Not only had we been targeted as their next serial killer victims when we turned them down, they selected another target because of me. I have lived with both relief and guilt all my life because of this. Intellectually, I know it's not my fault the bartender died, but I've always wondered how different the world would have been had she been able to live out her life, even though I would have been gone myself. Needless to say, that was the end of my bar date experiences for a long time. Postscript. I just found out Charlene Gallego has been living in Sacramento under an assumed name. Apparently, she was paroled there after serving her prison term. She has been making amends for her horrors by performing works of charity. Gerald Gallego died in prison before he could be executed. I know good old Jerry got what he deserved, but I'm not sure how I feel about Charlene living as a free woman. She claimed on the stand to have been manipulated by Jerry, which is why she went along with the killing spree. Maybe that's why she never said anything in the bar. Maybe she was under his complete control, so much so that she couldn't even speak in public. I would love to have a private chat with her. Story 8. In the early 1980s, well before I was born, my mother was teaching in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a very hectic job, and she was glad to get back home every day a little after 3 o'clock. The first thing she would do would be to change into her running gear and go for a run. She was never a fast runner. Normally, she would do about a 10-minute mile, but she continued running because fitness is good. She started out on the run one day, but there was a problem with the door to the apartment she and my dad lived in. The apartment was on the 2nd story. As she closed the door, the lock to the apartment gave her trouble in closing and locking the door. Every time she would leave or come, it would usually take her 5 or 10 minutes to get the door locked. She and my dad often talked about getting the lock fixed on the door, but so far they had not done so. Finally, the apartment was locked, and off she went for her daily run. My mom was getting toward the middle of the run when suddenly a jogger came up beside her. He was tall and thin, had curly gray hair and blue eyes. He started off talking, asking questions like, "Where do you live? Do you jog every day?" etc. After a few minutes, my mom began to get uncomfortable with the personal tone he was using while asking quesitons. She stopped answering them. Finally, she saw a street, and she knew that if she cut over on that street, she could run back home. She tried to tell the man, "I got to go now. Bye." Then she turned down the street and started heading home. A few seconds later, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. Not wanting to turn around to see who it was, she continued as fast as she could, probably reaching a 9 or 8-minute mile as she flew past. Finally, she saw the door to their apartment building. She ran up the stairs, saying to herself, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, help me." She got to the door, holding on to the keys. She slipped them into the lock as quickly as she could and turned them. And the door opened right away. She ran inside, locking the door, and pressed herself against the far wall of the apartment, completely out of breath. Seconds later, she heard a stiff but friendly knock on the door. "Who is it?" my mom said, her voice cracking. The gray-haired man she met on the run said, "You know who I am, and you know what I want." Now she was completely and totally afraid, and she yelled back, "You had better get out of here, or I will call the police." She did not move. A minute or two later, she heard footsteps going down the stairs. No one else was in the apartment building. After waiting a few minutes, still not moving, she was pretty sure that the man was gone. Across the street was a prayer ministry called Bethel House of God. She called there and explained to them what happened and asked them if she could come over and if they would wait for her on the lawn. They said of course they would. She waited until they might be on the lawn. Then she rushed out of the apartment, ran down the stairs, then ran across the street. My dad didn't come home until maybe an hour or so later, but he soon got to hear about it. Sure enough, every other time the lock would still stick and take 5 or 10 minutes to fix. My mom was thankful for how God got the lock to work immediately, that one time. Story 9. So when I was much younger, I was heading home from visiting family in Austin. I've made this trip so many times that there's no reason I shouldn't have been going northeast out of the city. But many years ago, me, my dad, and my brother were driving home from Austin using Google Maps. Google Maps routed us south out of Austin, which we just didn't notice. It was around 1 or 2 a.m. We rolled into this. I wouldn't say town at all, it was just a neighborhood far out of the city. But it was completely empty except for these ramshackle huts. All of the buildings were these little huts made of like crazy rusted scrap metal and rotted wood. There were no cars, no lights, no sign of any life here. Google Maps just started taking us in circles through this neighborhood. We were going in circles here for around 10 or 15 minutes before we decided to just wing it home, because this was creepy. We had tried to make a new route on Google Maps, and it just kept doing this. We got out. Nothing super special happened. I was just watching videos on like fake towns in Utah. And while this isn't anything like that, the stories just reminded me vaguely of this. And ABT, how creeped out I was about this. What happened here? I don't know. Just a navigational error in a really weird place? Story 10. When I was 9, we lived in a remote forested military area. Can't disclose too much for privacy, but yeah, let's just say spotting elephants, deer, and the occasional predator was a normal part of life there. One night, there was a formal event that our parents had to attend, and kids weren't allowed. So it was just me and my friend, let's call him Carl, both 9 years old, and our younger brothers, Sam and Duke, around 5, all made-up names. We stayed at my place and decided to watch Shrek. It was late at night, pitch dark outside because of the forest, and eerily quiet. Suddenly, the lights went out for a few minutes, then came back on. We were standing near the window when I heard Carl's mom calling out my nickname from outside. We lived on the second floor. It was a strange, raspy voice, not normal, and what made it creepier was that barely anyone knew that nickname. It wasn't something the neighbors would know. "Cindy, Cindy." I asked Carl if he heard it too. He looked freaked out and said, "No, but I heard your mom calling my name." "Carl, Carl!" We both froze. There was no way our moms were anywhere nearby. They were at the party, miles away, and we were alone in the house. The younger kids, Sam and Duke, said they heard the voices too. But us, being 9 years old, we assumed they were just copying us or mishearing things as they were just around 5 years old. Still, we were all terrified. We tried to distract ourselves with the movie and waited for our parents to come home. When they finally did, we told them. But of course, they didn't believe us. They brushed it off as imagination or a dream. We all eventually moved on. Fast forward almost 9 years later, Carl and I met again and were reminiscing. I brought up that night, and to my shock, he remembered everything clearly. His brother Duke did too. My brother Sam only remembered bits and pieces, but it was enough to confirm we hadn't imagined it. I still don't know what we heard or why. But it wasn't normal. It wasn't just a prank or a dream. We heard each other's moms calling us in eerie voices when they were nowhere near us. To this day, I can't explain it. Story 11. I am a big believer in the paranormal as it has been so prominent in my life since birth. I have a lot of true stories which I thought you may like to hear. My nan, on my dad's side, was gifted, so to say. She saw ghosts, accurately predicted multiple life-changing events for multiple family members, and much, much more. When I was born, my nan was there, and she said 2 things to my mum. Firstly, that a man dressed like a sailor with blonde, curly hair was in the room. Little did she know she was perfectly describing my great-granddad, who has died many years before. Secondly, she said, unlike my sister, I was also born with the gift. That's when it all started. From before I can remember, I have seen dead people. And I'm not talking about the imaginary friend kind of ghost. I'm talking the man called Jeremy, who lived in the cellar. The man with no head walking down the street. Or the man drenched in gasoline running down my hallways, who I called the Rainbow Man. The last one I saw for years and still remember vividly to this day. Later in my life, I started predicting things happening in my dreams. The night before, my other nan, Mum's side, suddenly and unexpectedly went into hospital. I dreamt the situation so vividly I was upset the next morning, only to find my mum missing from the house after school, because she had rushed out to make a 3-hour trip to be by her side, like in my dream. My nan was okay in the end. This is the only major life event that I have predicted so far. Other little things comparable to déjà vu I get regularly, except I remember them from the dream I had the day or week before. After what happened with my nan, I really tried to shut off that ability because I was scared. But within the past year or two, while watching your content, I have been trying to open myself back up to it, and it has been spooky to say the least. I've been meditating and trying to keep my mind open to things, and tonight I felt like I had a minor breakthrough. I was laying in bed watching the newest episode of Call Me Chris's true crime podcast, the one on the 40-year-old cold case solved by Redditors when the strangest thing happened. I was relaxing in bed with my eyes closed, listening to it. Suddenly, I get the feeling that someone was at the end of the bed watching me. Then a name popped into my head. I thought it was weird, but thought nothing of it. 10 more minutes into the episode, I find out it was the victim's name. I felt very weird. Like I didn't think of the name, but rather that it was put into my head by someone else. After the episode finished, I put on a meditation video to go to sleep when it happened again, but this time it was blue butterflies. Less than a minute later, it was mentioned. BTW, I am certain I had never watched either video before or anything. Something else which I found weird was that I always tell everyone in my family that I will come back in my afterlife as a blue butterfly to show them I'm there. I got me wondering if it is my now deceased Nan telling me about my gift. Story 12. So, about 6 months ago, I got out of an abusive relationship. TWDV. For context, I am a 22-year-old female, and I was dating a girl the same age as me. We got together when we were both 20, and I was instantly enamored by her. I was so drawn to her, and the more I learned about her, the more attracted to her I was. Our relationship was great at first, laughing together for hours, going on many adventures together, becoming best friends first, until it all went to shit. So, my ex was really big into spirituality and astrology and all of that, so it was something we talked about a lot before we started anything romantic, and we had a very creepy experience together while randonauting, which is a whole other story in itself that I can't even begin to explain. She eventually told me that she was a practicing witch and had been since high school. Honestly, I thought it was kind of cool, and I wasn't really sure what I believed in at the time, but I knew I had just experienced something out of the ordinary that I couldn't explain. So, as the months went on, my ex and I grew closer, and she began divulging more about this side of herself to me. She told me that she prayed to Lilith, Satan's mistress, because she was a strong woman figure and represented dark and repressed femininity. At the time, I really thought nothing of this. I thought she was just like being a feminist, you know? Honestly, I didn't like the idea of religion because of the corruption of it all, historically, and even presently. So I hope you understand that these blaring red flags weren't so loud to me. But after a while, our relationship started to turn sour. Our arguments got more and more volatile, and eventually it led to her putting her hands on me. The first time it happened, she looked into my eyes and smiled at me while she did it. It was the most disturbing, terrifying smile I've ever seen in my life. It wasn't anything like that Smile movie. It was like a side smirk, almost like, I finally have the chance to do this, like she had been waiting, like she was excited. It's safe to say I was terrified and confused. At the time, I knew my ex had a temper, but I didn't know she was capable of putting her hands on me, especially not the extent that she did. She didn't just put her hands on me, she dragged me through the house, beat me in every room, banged my head against walls and glass doors, and left me bloody and bruised. I tried to leave, but she refused to give me my phone or keys, so I had to say fuck it and make a run for it to the nearest 7-Eleven, where I called the police. They took one look at my injuries and heard my story and took me back to my house and arrested her. I watched her get dragged away in handcuffs, screaming and crying that she loved me and was sorry and just wanted to talk to me. I was gutted. And unfortunately, that wasn't the end of our story. I picked her up from jail that day, and she told me there was a restraining order in place and that we weren't allowed to be seeing each other. I was devastated, and it seemed that she was too. She expressed that she wanted things to work with us, and she wanted to make it work no matter what she had to do. We talked about it and came to the conclusion that the only way to continue was if I got the charges dropped, because she couldn't bear to be with me if she had assault charges on her name because of what she did to me. Again, I see how big of a red flag this is now, but I was so entangled in the manipulation I didn't see it before. So I did everything I could to get them dropped. I told the police I had lied. I paid for her lawyer, all while she wasn't working. She never had a real job our entire relationship. BTW. But to nobody's surprise, the hitting didn't stop that day. It only got worse and more frequent. But I wasn't going to risk calling the police again, because I knew what happened last time and how mad she got when she saw the discovery and watched the body cam footage of me telling the police what happened. So I endured it. Months of living in complete hell. She would physically restrain me, spit on me, not let me leave, threaten to grape me, push her knees into my abdomen. Mind you, I'm 5'2" on a good day, and she was 5'8" and pretty significantly bigger than me, and threatened to unalive me constantly. She verbally abused me severely, and I honestly thought I deserved all of it. Not only did the beatings get worse, but the worse they got, the more she enjoyed them. One time in particular, I started to have an asthma attack during the beating, and she just sat back and smiled at me, waiting for me to die, and then she suddenly started to panic and called 911, freaking out on the phone with them, crying. And this didn't just happen once either. She would lock me out of the house, lock me in the house, stand behind me car if I ever tried to drive away, chase me down the street and beat me outdoors, in public, in our neighborhood if I tried to run. I was in hell, and the more it happened, the less human she became. I came to terms with me, fate. I was terrified, but I didn't know how to leave, and I knew I was going to end up dead. Until one day we had a fight, and she ended up manipulating me into saying I wanted to die, after telling me numerous times for months that I would be better off dead, and everyone else would be too, and she had me admitted into a psychiatric unit. I was livid at first. I thought she deserved to be locked up in there, and not me. But I didn't know that this would end up saving my life. Being away for a week and being surrounded by people who saw me, who told me I wasn't worthless and that I was actually pretty cool, gave me the strength to leave. It was one of the hardest things I had to do, and she continued to harass me for weeks after I ceased communication and refused to leave my house and completely destroyed it before she did, and took a lot of my belongings. But at least I got out with my life intact. In the next few months, I got a restraining order against her, but the terror never faded. I still felt her presence. I felt her haunting me, whispering in my ear. It felt like she was still there. And then I remembered what she told me. If we ever break up, I'm cursing the fuck out of you and your family. Your mother, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your dog, and your uncle's dog. And then the things that had been happening around the house began to make sense. 2 weeks after we broke up, I was sitting in the house with my friends after she had left, and the second someone called her evil, the joint I was hitting completely burst into flames. There was no lighter in sight, I was just hitting that witch. And this wasn't the only thing that happened. Stuff would fly off the shelves when we talked about her, and other crap. I was terrified. Beyond scared. So I started asking around, talking to people I knew that knew about this shit, until I found someone that could help, and she told me everything. She basically explained back our entire relationship, how she wanted me to think that her hitting me was my fault, and that my sadness gave her more power, and that's how she was such a powerful witch already. She was using me to become more powerful. She really had been enjoying it. And not only that, but she had placed dozens of curses on my family, and she started when we were still together. I don't want to detail what the curses were, because I'm not really sure how this shit works, and I don't want to manifest that anymore, so I won't. But I will say she wanted me dead. The person I spoke to said she would help me, and in the days after I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. The air felt more fresh. I felt like I could breathe again. I felt lighter, happier, safer. As much as I now feel protected spiritually, her memory still haunts me. Not only that, but I am now haunted with the knowledge that she is doing this same thing to some other girl in some other state. And it's only getting worse because the more curses she places, which she is still actively doing, the more she loses her soul. She is sacrificing her soul, her humanity, to place these curses, to feel more powerful, to not feel pain anymore, and I honestly feel sorry for her. But more than anything, I feel sorry for the girl who is currently being tortured at the hands of this evil. I hope more than anything she is okay. I pray for her now, and I hope she survives and has the courage and strength to do what I couldn't and stop my ex. There are so many more chilling details, but there are some things I'm just not ready to talk about, and some things I don't want to put into the universe any more than they already are. So I really hope you all can still understand how truly terrifying this was, and still is, without the complete story. It's also my first time telling it, so I really hope it made sense. If you've read this far, thank you for hearing my story, and as a reminder to everyone that's struggling right now, it really does get better, and I'm so happy you're still here.